So good afternoon and good morning to everybody. Thank you very much for attending. We are going to start kicking off. A few more people to dial in, as you might expect. So before we get into the main program, I wanted to give you just a little bit of sort of housekeeping. So second thing really, apart from welcoming you all here, is for those of you not familiar with our anti-competitive practices and antitrust practices, you can find them on the link here. Essentially, we take great care to ensure that we don't fall foul of anything that might be considered to be anti-competitive. I think it's extremely unlikely today, but I will be taking notes and making sure that nothing like that happens. So the third thing is that we've got about 270 registered, which will mean we'll get someone less than that, of course, attending. But it's too many people to have too many live questions. So what we are suggesting is that use the chat facility for questions. We will have time to answer some of those questions during the course of the event. But if we, as is quite likely, we don't have time to answer all of them, we will make sure we answer every single question. So if there's something you want out of us, or indeed any of the speakers, or anybody doing any of the pitches later on, please do send us a question and we will take note of them, and all of them will be answered in due course. Lastly, in terms of just sort of setting up the protocols, we're recording this because we may use bits of it in the future to help people that couldn't attend today. Obviously, if we do so, we'll do that with the permission of everybody who has spoken to make sure they don't think they said anything they shouldn't have done. So that's the format for today. In terms of the agenda, I should say, actually, this agenda has really been formed from some things that you really have said. So you've said to us you wanted to get some examples about practically how you can use Oasis and models in Oasis, and of course, how you can deploy them. So you're going to see that's the reason we got some of those items on the agenda today. Secondly, you wanted to get other people's experiences of either using Oasis or standards around Oasis. So we've got a few of those. And thirdly, you wanted to get some idea about a little refresher of what's available. So as you can see from what's on the screen right now, Max and Ivan are going to talk about their experiences from Guy Carpenter and Zurich about different aspects, of course, about how they're using Oasis. And then secondly, we're going to lightning pitches from both modelers and hosting companies. I'm sure many of you have seen how these work before. Essentially, they're time limited, and Matt, who's introducing those, will explain a bit more, but they're basically 3 minutes each. Obviously, you're not going to get the full description of what these organizations can do for you. The idea is you get a refresher about what's really going on, and hopefully that'll be beneficial for you, and of course, indeed, beneficial for them as well. So breakouts after that, and you'll get an introduction from Julia about how they work. There will be links to those breakouts. That are going to appear in the chat, because essentially it was the easiest way of doing it without allocating people to breakout rooms. Essentially, they're all different Zoom calls, essentially, and they will go on for, as it says, 45 to 60 minutes. And at the end of that, it's there's no coming back to a plenary. We didn't think that made any sense, so we're not going to be doing that. So that's the format over the course of the next hour or so, and we hope that's going to be very useful for you. I think the only other thing I would say is there's a huge amount of investment that's gone into Oasis software, which is really paying off in terms of performance and reliability. And in fact, there's a huge more amount of investment that's going to go over the next 12 and 24 months that's going to make it really fantastic. But right now, it's adding the value that many of you say you want out of choice and out of standardization, and the benefits that bring. So I think really, I suppose, part of my message for today is the opportunity for you to benefit out of Oasis and models in Oasis is really here today. You're going to get a snapshot of some of that, and we hope that we really, really enjoy it. Last thing before I forget is, of course, we've got a number of people doing lightning pitches from modelers and some of the main really hosting companies that are available. But of course, there are others too, and you can see those on our website, or you can talk to any of the team. So I think the point to remember is there's much, much more than you can see here today, but you're going to get hopefully a pretty good view of what you can get today. So I think, Max, if you want to share your screen, I'll stop sharing mine. And then we should be able to move on to the first speaker, and hopefully he's got his slides. If not, I've got some backups. There we go. Looking good. Yeah. I can see those. And in presentation mode. Max, over to you.
Awesome. You can hear me as well, I hope.
Loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. Well, a pleasure to be here. I only have a few minutes, and I'm very grateful that we get a chance to just briefly highlight what we've been doing. Dickie, you said it. There's been a lot of investment. Also at our end, because we jumped on this train quite early, and we are in a stage right now where I think we start to benefit quite heavily from it, especially from the standards, etc. So really, just on a super high level, benefits of using Oasis, and maybe also left and right of the benefits as well. Very briefly. Just to have said it, there's this other breakout session that I also was invited to kind of talk a little bit about conversion. That's going to be my second part, but for now I focus on this, the experience and benefits. All right, so what have we done? We at Guy Carpenter, we have implemented Oasis as our model architecture. I'm the head of the European model development at Guy Carpenter. We build CAD models, and these CAD models are now all running on the Oasis framework. And in order to do so, we had to implement certain things. So when we start with industry or portfolio data from our clients, which are usually primary insurance companies, we first of all need to get that ready into the Oasis format that we now have. It's the OED format. It's fantastic. However, we need to do a few things before we can actually kind of load that in. We need to make sure it's properly disaggregated. We need to validate it, to make sure we have the proper, occupancy codes, etc. And also another thing that I think is underestimated. We need to make sure that we know exactly what's the requirement of the number of samples, which is model and portfolio specific if you look close enough. So that's what this pre-processing step does. And then it's no secret we are working with our colleagues at NASDAQ, and our models do run on what's called NRMC. It's the NASDAQ Risk Modeling Catastrophes platform, which is now enabled on AWS. And we have, we're still growing, but for now we migrated 30 plus GCAT models to there, and we're also running third-party models. Then we run Oasis, we get the results data. It's still CSV files today. We're keen to get the ORD ready, which is kind of the Oasis results data that is currently under construction. On that, we need to do post-processing, and we hope that goes away with the ORD. We're loading the CSV files. We do stuff with it to make it ready for our meta risk DFA tool that computes DP curves and does the reinsurance pricing, etc. We got, not going into environments too much, but we got multiple. We are currently running the stuff on 6 different engines. One thing that does not yet work today is that to kind of distribute between engines. If you've got one analysis, a huge job, that's actually something we're waiting for. But of course, you can, run analysis in parallel on different machines. And we got something like 50 plus CAD modelers using it, and we do quite a few runs per week. So the benefits really are obvious, I think. We now have access to not just our own models, but without any extra work, we can get access to other providers. This community here, we can all discuss and improve and work on the common same platform if we want to. And, the open data standards, I think, I'm really hoping this is going to be the great success because it's so helpful already. So in there, we just, brief description of, what's been out there for us. We run Cat Risk Solutions, JBA, GEM, and our own models on this already. We cover 17 regions, so that's not countries, but regions, 3 perils. And this year, we already completed 1,166 runs. Yeah, so it's scalable too. Well, I think most of this is clear, but just brief repetition. It has a good chance to become the industry standard, and that would be great, I think. We have proven that it's scalable. We are running, say, China Flood on this. It comes with an event set that has 250 gigs, and my colleague David Marichal, our lead hydrologist, he still hasn't done enough, and he wants to go 500 gigs and more. So with the DTMs available today, that's possible. We can share models between companies. Everybody can do it, really. I mean, it takes, a few days to learn how this is done, but at no cost, you can build a model and, learn how this works. And so on, yeah. We have industrialized internal model development to kind of spit out Oasis models. And the thing is also that I believe, if that becomes a standard, we can all, be way more efficient on the evaluation of different model providers and everything that comes with professional CAD modeling and what is necessary to do so. And then ultimately, and I'm not going through all of this now because there was this extra session, but it is totally a benefit that Oasis is now also serving with these open data standards, and we have spent quite a lot of time to kind of build mechanics that are converting back and forth, etc. And we are really keen to do the same on ORD. So in a nutshell, and that's my last slide, the journey is still not finished, but there are a lot of benefits that I guess were in the beginning also the reason to kind of start Oasis. But now we are at a stage where they really pay off, and we got the critical mass, and it's working. Yeah, it's not perfect, but it's working, and it's ready for production, and it's scalable. And there's a few pieces that are in focus for us for the next kind of, let's say, 12 or 24 months. It's improve in performance even further. It has improved so much, and we're really grateful for that. Just saying, the sampling method and the Oasis Enterprise platform that will work with parallel computing as such, that will be a game changer. Not criticizing it today, but I really believe if we get that thing done, that will be just a different order of magnitude, and then we can totally use all the cloud capacity that we want to, and others like geocode and disaggregation. So there's things out there that we still need to do, but I can say that today we're quite happy with how it works, and we're looking forward to a future with this framework.
Max, that's fantastic, brilliant. Do you want to unshare, and then we'll move to Ivan can then share his screen. While you're just doing that, if you can multitask for a second, and Ivan, you want to just get ready with yours. But I think that, thank you, great message. Just on the standards thing, I think that we're having conversations every day about new companies that are saying, how can we help promote these standards? How can we help develop them further? We're sort of 3/4 of the way through bringing in liability standards now. We're having conversations on marine, and we're about to start doing the same thing for cyber. Mm-hmm. There's just a huge momentum, which the thing is, but I would be the first to admit that there's always a lot to do, right? And we always are very acutely aware of how much this to do is. Just the one other thing that struck me when you were talking about sort of your needs and ongoing needs and everything else, and this may be obvious to some, or maybe even many, but I think maybe it's worth saying is our development timeline is entirely prioritized by the users and owners of Oasis. Yep. So if collectively you go, we need to do something, that is exactly what we do. There is no other agenda for us than doing what you want. And the only possible, I suppose, challenge sometimes is, if half the people want one thing and half the people want the other. Well, okay, at least that's a good problem to have, in the sense of we're driven by the needs of our users, and that's what goes ahead. So nothing's perfect, but it's pretty good. So thank you for that, Max. Now, Ivan, you're next. So a different type of company, different size, different perspective. Looking forward to it. Over to you.
Thank you, Dickie, for having me, and hello everyone, and thanks, Max, for the input. You mentioned primarily the standardization and the scalability. These terms, they resonate well, and I think this community understands the importance of these. Where really I come from is there are so many challenges out there. Think about all the emerging risks: cyber, casualty cat, pandemics, you name it, climate change. All of these challenges are real challenges, and some of the global really big ones to actually resolve. We have a responsibility, clearly, and the role to play in turning these into opportunity. I see a lot of brain power really spent on tasks that really do not add so much value, and that really hurts. So I think we have a responsibility to move the brain power towards the opportunities, and to really take a look at these challenges and spend the time in adding value to this world. So I'm gonna have a couple of minutes only, so let's just move on. I want to give a view in a nutshell really on the landscape that we've been building within Zurich over the past couple of years, focusing on the data. I start on the left-hand side. So we brought all the exposure data, all the location data into a single place. We have some great analytics, hotspot identification. So it's become an analytics platform as well. Data really matters. Hazard layers organized in a way that they can be shared, deployed internally, turning data sets into underwriting capacity. That's the things that we are doing within that box. Increasingly, we're developing models internally. They tend to be maybe in niche areas or opportunities that we get, as for example, in 2020 from COVID. So we built a pandemic model. We have other models for crop, casualty cat, and also blood proxy models. So that's kind of the internal model landscape that is evolving. But then, of course, we are licensing models from a number of vendors for actually all type of scenarios. So NatCat, man-made, systemic risk. But then, of course, increasingly, we see models becoming available through Oasis and NASDAQ. So that's kind of the landscape, the ecosystem that we essentially have today. And I would like to take a closer look at the right-hand side. So essentially the cat models and the platforms, as this is obviously the topic today. So what really matters about cat models has changed quite significantly over time, and it is still changing. So I think we've had an expectation years ago to kind of get, good answers, precise answers. Today, everybody knows there needs a lot of validation. There needs to be a lot of adjustments. There needs to be a lot of additions for non-modeled. All of that is reality. So transparency, quality, customization, transparency on uncertainty, standardization, these kind of things have become relatively more important over time. And this is really where also the standards do come in. We heard a little bit about the benefits of the standards. So just here a list for those maybe who are not so familiar yet. What essentially we see in the open data standard is all the things that you really want to see: the flexibility to grow over time, to bring in emerging risks, so kind of extensibility. But then, of course, the synergies, what I mentioned initially, spend a lot of time reformatting, copy paste, and all this kind of loss of brain power to essentially replace that with standardized automated processes and just get more insights easier, quicker, and spend the brain power in more value adding tasks. So those are kind of just in a nutshell the key features. There's others, but I'm not going to drain the slides. You have them right here. And I just want to kind of give a little bit of a view on what's actually how we are progressing over the next couple of months and years in our kind of ecosystem. This is a very, very simplified view of how we process data, actually thousands of portfolio at any one time at different frequencies, but essentially processing exposure data from one standard directs into SPDB, kind of a standard processing database. and from there into models, whether it's licensed or internal models, and then into an aggregation. That's kind of what we have today, very, very simplified. Essentially what we do this year is we do actually not have a standard for results. So CAD modeling results, currently, we do not use a standard. So we're introducing maybe a little bit by surprise, not the exposure standard first, but actually the results data standard, simply because we do not have a standard yet. So we start with the ORD to have a standard internally for results, which will bring benefits into the aggregation. And then in a second step, we will be replacing SPDB with the OED, which will open up the door to obviously get model views quicker. Any model that supports that path obviously will be potentially part of an ecosystem. So essentially, very simplified in 3 steps, essentially the journey where we are heading. That's the last slide already, just in brief. Lots of opportunities out there, a lot of challenges. Clearly, we need a very strong response, and we cannot compromise quality for other kind of priorities. So the quality is very important. We talk about significant exposures we need to manage responsibly. And clearly with all the developments, Oasis, ODS, we see opportunities to actually enrich the ecosystem. We see opportunities to speed up and get the efficiencies, get more easy access to more views. And last but not least, we don't see essentially a strong model response being compromised by an open CAD modeling approach, but actually enriched and enhanced. That's it from my side. Thanks a lot. And I give back to Vicky.
That's very kind, Ivan. Thank you very much for that. It's fascinating. The Oasis team has just been doing some analysis across the market on behalf of a particular entity around some questions about how exposure management works around things like multi-model use and around augmentation of data and a few other things. And I suppose in a way, these are all things that we've got quite a lot of knowledge about because we have many conversations around the world. But what we found particularly interesting once we started documenting this was how different this actually was between large globals, large reinsurers, London market and others. And of course, some of that you'd expect because the size means the different approaches have to be taken. But I think we were slightly surprised about some of these differences. And actually, in some cases, surprised about some similarity between small and large too. And we'll, I mean, this is obviously a private peer review only available to those that have participated. But if anybody actually on the call today thinks they'd be interested in seeing a bit more about that and they want to contribute, then if you contribute, you can get the data back and we could talk about that if you're interested. So fascinating, Ivan, thank you, that was brilliant. Right, we're now going to go into what we're calling the lightning pitches, which is these very sort of quick, well, here we go. And Matt, you're going to introduce that, so over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Dickie. So for the lightning pitches, we have 8 speakers. The first 4 that you see on the screen there, they'll be representing modelling firms who currently offer models in Oasis. They'll be presenting in no particular order. They'll be then followed by 4 more speakers from the main hosting companies that offer commercial hosting and consulting services for Oasis. Again, these will be presented in no particular order. And just to add note to what Dickie said in his introduction, these aren't the only hosting options available in Oasis. And my colleague, Ben Hayes, will be discussing alternative hosting options in his breakout session a bit later. So do join that if you're interested in the hosting. So for the lightning pitches, again, Dickie sort of mentioned it before, but I'll go into the detail. Each speaker will get 3 minutes. And in those 3 minutes, they'll be able to present no more than 3 slides, which I'll be controlling. So speakers, you'll just need to tell me when to move on. And we do need to be quite strict and a little bit fun with the times. So after your 3 minutes, you will hear this klaxon. So hopefully you heard that and it wasn't too scary, but I do feel very powerful at the moment. And I feel a bit like a game show host on a Saturday night. So when you hear that klaxon, we will allow you to finish your sentence. If you do go on too long, Julia also has the power to mute you and cut you off. So It's nothing personal at all, but we do need to stick to time and the 3 minutes for each speaker. So we hope you find these quick and short format of presentations quite useful. Like Dickie said, it's not going to give you everything you want, but it will certainly give you a flavour of an overview of what each company has to offer, and it can give you some quite succinct information in a very small space of time. So with that, we'll begin. First up are the modelling companies, and we have Will Gardner, who is the founder and managing director of Combus. Now, Will is dialing in from New South Wales, I think, in Australia. So it is the middle of the night there. So Will, we appreciate you joining us, and you look pretty much awake and ready to go.
Yeah,
so
already.
I'll start your 3 minutes, and off you go.
Okay, thank you. Can you go to the first slide, please? Okay, yeah, thanks. Thanks, and good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everybody. Combus does models for Australia, and we had the honour of being one of the first modelling firms on the hosted platforms, and we've been putting all of our Australian models on since 2017. So in that year, we put bushfire, severe convective storm, and low pressure systems. Later in the year, added cyclone, and then the following year, 5 different earthquake models on the platform. A couple of interesting things there that was hosted right from the start on the NASDAQ platform in its previous names and the NRMC. We've also have, within each of those 5 perils, we have 6 different sub-perils, so wind, flood, surge, hail, fire, shake. And using the occurrence files in the Oasis system, we have the ability to allow the users to flip between 10,000, 100,000, and also to incorporate cross-peril correlation and clustering. So we use the occurrence files for that. Last couple of years, we've been working on detailed loss models, and we're rolling those out this year on Oasis on the various software as a service platforms. You can see there, the first one off the first cab off the rank is going to be bushfire, and then followed by some of the other perils, including flood, or sub-perils including flood. That's at 25-meter resolution, and I know Max, you're saying size doesn't really matter, but our footprint files are in the terabytes. Yeah, thank you. Couple of technical points on our setup. We currently run the Oasis system in-house on various combinations of Linux, Windows, on PCs, laptops, also on the Amazon cloud using the Oasis user interface. The ALM models are available for license right now on NASDAQ or directly. Our detailed loss model will be coming out on Oasis this year and various variations. We incorporate what you would call the standard build. This is more of a technical thing, but in terms of the coding, we're not making any modifications to the standard Oasis code, with the exception of taking the option of going to the higher precision. So we go higher precision integers and floating points, and that gives us the ability to do a number of things, including this innovative approach that we're using, which is event-driven area perils. So it's like a variable variable resolution grid, but it actually varies by event, they're not static. And next slide, please. Last 3 points here in my 3 minutes. Our main priority since the start of Combus and this whole project was to be a model developer, not a software developer, and Oasis has allowed us to do that. Allows us to focus on the ground up losses and let Oasis and the OED do all the financial work, which has been a huge weight off our shoulders. And the last thing is it's one highly flexible modeling engine that does everything with, of course, great support from the Oasis team. I think that's my 3 minutes. Thank you very much. Goodbye, everybody.
That's great, Will. Thank you very much, and we appreciate you staying up for that. It's amazing how quickly 3 minutes goes, right?
And I'll stay up for the rest of it too. So keep going.
That's great. Thank you very much. So next up, we have Stephen Hutchins. Stephen is the head of modelling at JBA Risk Management. And Stephen, if you're ready, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Matt. Hello, everyone. So how to satisfy various different client cat modeling problems, all in similar limited timeframes, wanting answers to slightly different aspects of flood risk across multiple countries. How do you tailor the data inputs and outputs and experience to the client's expectations? I'm going to outline just a few examples of where that's been easy using JBA's global flood modeling running through Oasis. And firstly, then here on this slide, a multi-partner project on which JBA worked as part of the Oasis Climate and Catastrophe Risk for Asia project. And the client here is the government of Bangladesh, with a local insurance broker lined up to use the model. They need to run it themselves, so the implementation uses the reference Oasis user interface and will be installed in-house for the client. And within this work, we can flex our model the way that we need it to via the Oasis API. In this case, we've injected flood vulnerability curves for Bangladesh into our existing standard model. Next slide, please. Okay, so here I'm highlighting two projects, both multi-country cat model analyses for international development. And again, they involve multi-party collaborations, the sort of work that Oasis facilitates by bringing together the parties and connecting them, by guiding those different parties towards a common language, by furthering the development of common formats, and of course, they facilitate it by enabling the existence of a common cat modeling platform. One of these projects considered 27 EU member states. The other ran a cat model across 11 Central Asian countries. The first was for the World Bank, the other for the Asian Development Bank, and that was a project led by Willis Towers Watson. And across these two pieces of work, in one of them, it was easy to run a new event set with the model representing climate-driven change in hazard by 2050. In both of them, I think it was easy to run specialist education and healthcare vulnerabilities simply by not doing any model rebuilds, but by just passing them in through the Oasis API. Next, please. So thirdly, using a cat model for global site assessments. And here we've been working for a global risk consultancy and considering risks like bottling sites across the world on behalf of a global drinks distributor, telecoms assets in Italy and other countries, and commercial sites in China and Indonesia. And in each case, it's straightforward to satisfy the client need to run with specialized data without needing a new model release, and be that, once again, specialist vulnerabilities for, say, telecoms towers, or for example, to add local knowledge on site-specific flood defenses without, again, needing a model rebuild. So I hope that's just given some flavor of how the flex behind the Oasis API that enables running a customizable, open format, global flood cat model, how that's helping to push and encourage usage of cat models in field international development and sophisticated asset management. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Stephen. Everyone's, the first two have been very well rehearsed, very close to 3 minutes. So thanks a lot, guys. Really, really good work. Okay, so next we have Shaka Cerna. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. Shaka is the head of product development for EMEA, APAC, and Canada for impact forecasting. So if you're ready to go, Shaka, your time starts now.
Thanks, man. So hi everyone. We've been asked to share our experience on developing models on Oasis platform. So to that, I can say that we have embraced Oasis since the beginning, and our first implementation was the Europe Windstorm model. It was back in 2014 when we first explored the open model format, and we were quite impressed by the format, by its elegance, and the flexibility which allows you to put almost anything you like into Oasis. With our Europe Windstorm model, it was quite a smooth ride because we use in impact forecasting also pre-calculated data, and so we were just coping a little bit with discretization, but it was all solvable, and the Europe Windstorm model is now running on Oasis quite fine. Next, please. So then we moved to implementing more complex models, and yes, so we had a couple of our flood models implemented, and now we are working on the implementation of our Canada flood model, which is our so far biggest undertaking within Oasis. And we have bumped into several challenges, especially with flood models, which are linked with a very high resolution hazard and the need for precise geocoding. So the data sets were huge. Also, our events, no, back please. Also, our models are event-based, so there was a discrepancy in PML calculation, and we need to adapt our event sets for that to make sure that the PMLs are calculated in a consistent way, both within our platform and within Oasis. And finally, when we were considering multi-peril and the correct spatial dependency of the individual perils, we need to work out some sampling discrepancy, which was present in between our platforms. But it is still in progress, but I would like to say that with collaboration with the Oasis teams, we were able to preserve and even enhance the native Oasis model format, and we are really pleased for that. Next, please. And to wrap up, as I said, we are really committed to openness and transparency, and the Oasis model format is really suitable for that. So we are implementing more and more models onto Oasis, and all models are in Oasis native format. So we don't do any complex model wrapper or do not do any specific coding, which can be added to Oasis, but we don't like to do that because we really want to preserve the transparency.
Well, Sharpie, make the last point.
Thanks.
Okay. Thanks very much, Shaka. Sorry, I've got a bit of a sensitive mouse, so it's moving a little bit. Okay, so finally, we'll move on to our final speaker for the modelers, and this is Andrew Smith. So Andrew is the Chief Operating Officer at Fathom. So Andrew, if you're good to go, your 3 minutes start now.
Great. Thanks, guys. Thanks for the invite. So I'm going to attempt to, well, firstly, I'll ask for some sympathy because I'm going to attempt to condense like the last decade of my life into 3 minutes, which is pretty depressing thought, actually. So for those of you who are not aware, so Fathom was formed by a group of research scientists at the University of Bristol. So I guess the kind of team that Oasis is designed to help. So really specific research scientists building, we think, very good models. We focus on building large-scale flood models, and we build models for the whole planet. We also had grand ambitions in the beginning to build cat models for the insurance industry, but we quickly found out that actually that was a very difficult thing to do. Next slide, please. And I've listed kind of some of the main reasons why that is. A few of the other speakers have actually mentioned some of these. So model size, particularly for flooding, is difficult. We're talking about a very spatially complex peril. You have to represent it at high resolutions if you want to do a good job. And unfortunately, when you combine high resolution with large event sets at large scales, you end up with huge event sets in terms of the just raw size. There's also the vulnerability components of flood models. New research is showing us just how complex and nuanced that is. Nice linear relationships between hazard and damage just don't exist in reality. So if you want to represent vulnerability in something of a meaningful way, then you have to do that probabilistically. The financial components of these models, as research scientists building flood models, we knew little to nothing about, and thankfully Oasis really helps us plug that gap. The other thing that we were told early on was that nobody wanted a new platform to consume a specific model. People wanted standardization of data and one place to consume multiple models. And lastly, the models had to be really easy to use. Next slide, please. And for all of those reasons, we're just really thankful that Oasis exists. It's now in a position whereby we can execute really large models. I've used our US model here as an example. It is terabytes in size, and it executes millions of lines in minutes. It's very quick. We have rapid execution. It's open sourced. We have standardization of formats. You don't have to play around with different exposure data sets to use the model. It's multi-peril, so we have different forms of flooding in one place. And you can now consume models from a whole bunch of different vendors, not just us. And the models are indeed very easy to use. And I wanted to kind of wrap up with, I guess, a point of encouragement for other model developers. I think we're building at Fathom and other flood modelers on the call are building really difficult models, very large models, difficult to execute. If we can do that with Oasis, then to the other model developers out there, I'd say so can you.
Great, Andrew. Thank you. You still had 4 seconds to go, so you've taken the fun out of me pressing the button. So
to be honest, I was getting quite nervous about the klaxon, so I was kind of rattling through.
No, that's great. Thank you very much. We really appreciate it. Okay, so that's the lightning pitches for the modelers, and we now move on to the hosting companies. So we've got the 4 hosting companies, same criteria. Everyone gets 3 minutes. And first up is Chris Ewing, and Chris is head of client management at Impact Forecasting. So Chris, if you're good to go, I will hand it over to you.
Great, thanks Matt, and hi everyone. Thanks for having me. Hopefully, here we go. So how we're helping you with Oasis. Well, I've got 4 pillars here. I'm going to show you what we're doing. And let's break it down first, looking at the models. So our models are independent. The impact forecasting model is independent from modeling platforms. We have our own platform elements, but we're also deploying our models in other Oasis-based systems as well. And we're using established model definition formats. So as Joh mentioned just then, some of the Oasis hazard and vulnerability formats. And as we mentioned earlier, we're open, both commercially and technically, if you want to dig into the models and see what's there. Next, please, Matt. Thank you. And then in terms of platforms, we host models from multiple providers in Elements, the loss calculation engine, and there's flexible deployment options there as well. So it might be why I'm in the hosting section with a small h, but mainly, we deploy on-premise, but also have some cloud installations as well. We're supporting open loss engines such as Oasis LMF, so that's now within the Elements platform, so people can run models that are in the Oasis engine as well as within the impact forecasting engine. And we're also supporting multiple exposure formats. So within our impact workbench tool, you can convert data to and from the open exposure data format. And then the ORD, the open results data part, will come later this year. Next column. In terms of data formats, so we've been really kind of well versed now in using the hazard and vulnerability formats, and that helps us to deploy models. It also helps our customers to understand what's behind the models as well. So to really be able to dig into how the model was built, the assumptions made, and be able to dig into the hazard, and especially to be able to see and view and compare damage functions. We are using that standard data format. I mentioned that OED as model input, and we're looking at how we will use the open results data as well. And that's really key in obviously storing and exchanging both exposure and results data. So my colleagues on the Aon side of the business are engaged in a project working to supply the OED format to a number of reinsurers, and just to help that kind of standardization of data in the market. And obviously transformation tools even more important when we consider that. How do we get other vendor formats into that format? Next column, please. And the big part obviously is the community. So we've been a key part of the Oasis community, or we'd like to think that hopefully we've been a long-term, for sure, partner within the Oasis community, and we want to see that sustained and continuing. So whether that's helping to be part of market initiatives, working with our clients to make sure that they can consume Oasis and models with impact forecasting models within that. So we want to continue to do that.
Spot on. Thank you, Chris. That was great.
It was actually my alarm that time.
Couple of seconds in. That was fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
So we'll move on to the next speaker, who is James Lay. So James, the commercial director at NASDAQ. And James, if you're good to go, I'll hand you over.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Matt. Hi, everybody. So as Matt said, I'm James Lay, Commercial Director for the NASDAQ Risk Modelling Platform. So I'll give an overview of the modelling ecosystem that we've got and how that's developed over the past 5 years or so. So cast your mind back to the days of the Oasis Solutions project. There were very few Oasis-based models, maybe 2 or 3 at best, something like that. Nowadays, as you can see here, we've got 12 independent model providers that make their models available on our platform. I think this presents a unique opportunity for the cat modeling community to get a broader view of risk via a single unified platform, while still being able to leverage the different sort of features and functions that the various models can provide. Through the model community, many of the Lloyd's primary perils are on offer, such as US wind and quake, Japan quake, European windstorm, UK flood. And then we've got partners that have expert local knowledge in regions that are kind of growing in popularity, like the Middle East and Africa, Latin America, and Australia as well, we've mentioned already. Europe is also well served with flood, quake, and wind models available. And to add to all that, we're now starting to see climate conditioned models coming through as well for both flood and windstorm. So we'll have some available on the NASDAQ platform later in the year. Obviously, these are already proving to be very interesting for both current and prospective clients. Next slide, please, Matt. So over the past 5 years, we've seen a real step change in the companies using the platform and using models on our system. So we've got global insurers, reinsurers, and brokers all on board. Our platform's a cloud native, fully managed service. So it includes all end-to-end support, data security, and all the sort of change management functions for system and model components. Services can be provisioned very rapidly, so there's no reliance on clients' internal resources, and we can get models up and running in a matter of hours. So say there's a need from a business, to model a new portfolio in a new region, that can be addressed quickly and efficiently, with also now flexible licensing options allowing for periodic usage of models on the NASDAQ platform as well. As we've already seen, I think it's really pleasing to see the growing adoption of the OED format across the industry. And as more and more companies use it as their internal data format, the barriers around data conversion and risk transfer first really start to rapidly reduce. And that's directly kind of translating into increased adoption of Oasis-based models, which is kind of what we all want to see. I think the only other thing I would say is that our development roadmap, much like Dickie mentioned earlier, is heavily influenced by our clients, and we'll continue to listen carefully to their feedback and implement those features as fast as we can. So that's all from me, Matt. No chance for the klaxon, I'm afraid, but feel free to reach out if you have any other questions, obviously.
That's great. Thanks, James. Really appreciate that. So if we move on, our next speaker is Steve Smith. So Steve is the Director of Insurance and Product Modelling at Complex. So Steve, if you're ready to go, I'll hand you over the reins.
Great, thanks, Matt. Today I'll be talking about how QHelm, which is our catastrophe modelling platform delivering Oasis models, is an integral part of the data ecosystems we deploy to our clients. So at Complex, we believe that CAT models sit at the heart of a data ecosystem. A great deal of the infrastructure a property insurer or reinsurer develops is either in service of CAT modeling or to service CAT modeling processes driven by CAT modeling output. So in order to ensure CAT models facilitate data-driven decisions at all levels of a company, the data fabric must be able to easily ingest exposure data, then automatically clean it and tidy it up, able to enhance the base exposure data with either possibly external source of data such as vulnerability and hazard data, and finally should be easily and automatically able to flow data from the models into decision-making processes like underwriting, portfolio management, and capital modeling platforms, such as we get from our partner Tyche. Next slide, please. In a broader sense, data-driven decision-making requires starting with pulling data together, all the data sources at your disposal together, whether internal or external, commercially or open sourced. That data should be made available not only for CAT modeling, but other stakeholder uses too, from claims to actuarial. We've got to remember that, in the CAT modeling framework, we are not the only consumer of data products inside an insurer or reinsurer. There are other stakeholders there too that we need to address. So to do this, we believe companies shouldn't be developing one universal data format, which needs to be constantly changed all the time as things change, but rather a data fabric where all the data is stored contextually. So flat files stay flat files, databases stay databases, and data sets for different users are created by queries on demand. So for example, a query to create an OED. On top of that, the data fabric should be able to capture all the operations and transformations required to produce a particular data set, such that each data set is auditable and has absolute provenance. You know how we got the OED, for example, and what data made it up. Next slide, please. So finally, QHelm is our implementation of Oasis LMF. It facilitates more than just CAT modeling using Oasis models. We also, it's a place to find and consume data and services. But ultimately, we believe Helm sits at the heart of the data fabrics we are building for clients. We're able to deliver systems that combine internal and external data to drive a variety of processes from CAT modeling to capital modeling and from underwriting to claims. And I think I'm under time there, Matt.
You are. I'm feeling powerless now, Steve. Haven't hit well.
Sorry.
Thank you very much for that. And just for a bit of fun for me. Thanks for that, Steve. That was really good. And finally, we move on to our final speaker and final lightning pitch of the day, which is Justin Davis. Justin is Senior Vice President and Head of EMEA at Exceedance. So Justin, if you're ready to go, I'll start you off.
Lovely, thank you. Hi all. Oasis, various model providers and Exceedance have all come together to provide an on-demand CAT modeling service on the Oasis platform. So essentially, Oasis is the platform, the CAT modeling providers obviously provide the models, and we undertake the service. So clients send us the data, they tell us which model provider and the country peril analysis they want run. We do the work for that, and then we send back a standardized report alongside the cleansed data in OED format. So we think that this allows organizations to access model IP quickly, easily, and cost effectively because the pricing is truly transactional. It's purely based on the TIV of the account or the portfolio that we've modeled on their behalf. We've reached agreement with the model providers at the bottom, and we're still in discussions with a couple of others. If you could move on to the next slide, please. So here is the model availability. Those in green are those that we're currently able to work on immediately, and the models not in green are the ones where they're either in the queue or we haven't quite agreed a contract with that provider. So the value proposition of this, we're looking at various different value props. Maybe flip on to the next slide so we can see the model availability for other areas. The value props, clients, who are not licensing any models and want access to model IP, clients who are running a limited number of country perils and who may have an area that's upcoming material interest but don't license it. And then finally, clients who are running models but would like to see an alternate view of loss numbers for one or more country perils. I.e., you might look at US wind or something, and they're running a model, but actually they just want to see what the loss numbers from an alternate provider might look like. It's sort of a sense check, I suppose, loss comparison. That's it. I think I'm probably fairly under time. Thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Justin. Yes, still had 30 seconds, so well done. Okay, that is it for all of our speakers. So thanks to all 8 speakers who took part. I think it was a lot of fun, and it was really valuable to hear your offerings. If anyone on the call has any questions for the speakers or for Oasis, feel free to contact the speaker directly or Oasis, and obviously we'll try our best to answer all the questions offline. And so with that, I will pass back to Julia, who's going to do an introduction of the following breakout sessions. Thank you.
Okay, well, yeah, thank you everyone again on behalf of Oasis for joining today's webinar. We will close the main sessions in a few moments to start the workshops. So we've got the first one on how to get models into Oasis with Joh Carter. The second one is deployment options with Ben Hayes. And the third one is ODS and exposure data conversion led by Matt Donovan. So the links for the workshops have been put in the chat box, but I have also sent out an email about 2 minutes ago in case you haven't made up your mind or you can't see the link. So either copy the link of the session you would like to join, or just head to your emails and click the link of the breakout. And yeah, we also would like to make you aware that we won't be coming back to the main session. So once the breakouts have ended, that will be today's webinar. So again, any questions, feel free to reach out to us at any time. Until then, thank you again, goodbye, and take care.